So I think across all three of you, there's this common thread of supporting greater diversity in the way that we develop these tools and the way that we use them. So my first question I'll pose to all three of you while we're collecting questions from the audience. But the first is, how should AI-enabled technologies be developed to better ensure they support a greater diversity of individuals and skill sets in the workforce?
Uta?
I think, all technology as it emerges, there's an opportunity and there's a challenge. We call it a double-edged sword within sort of inclusive design. And I think quite often one of the things that we do is to deconstruct the question even further, like to go even further back. We call it the grandchild strategy, where we say, we continuously ask why? And I think one of the things that underlies a lot of the fear of AI and that has dominated the discussion about what to do about AI or work is that we're too specific. We're keeping a lot of our biases and assumptions right at the beginning. And one of the things we need to do, and one of the things that this gives us an opportunity to do, is to say, well, wait a sec, what assumptions are we making, and how we frame the questions and how we frame the potential fixes or solutions. So how do we improve the diversification of AI, or the way that AI addresses diversity, is to think about all of our underlying processes as well, and how they are not supportive of diversity. Whether, and I brought up just our data analytics and statistics, and how we manipulate data, how we eliminate outliers, how we privilege things like statistical power and statistical significance. Those all are averse to diversity. What we're trying to find there is, we're trying to find a dominant pattern. We're looking at the majority, we're looking at the average or the typical, and we actually associate that with truth. We say, you know, how do you find the true whatever? Well, it's not really the true thing we're finding. We're finding the majority. We're finding this mythical average, and then saying that's the truth and that's where we should go. Almost every decision that we have difficulty in making, what we fall back to is majority rules. And just even the notion of a fix or a solution to this is an issue, because there will be no terminal fix or solution. The minute we think that we've solved it, we're then making ourselves vulnerable to the next disruption. So what we need to think about is rethink this idea of only thinking about the majority, only thinking about the average, how we determine truth, and the idea that we're going to come up with a fix or solution, that we're going to compete for a fix or solution. That's a very, very long answer, but
of course. And before we turn to you guys, I read a piece that you wrote last night, and I pulled a quote because I thought that it was spot on to what you're saying right now. And this is from your post: "If you are unique, and aren't we all, numbers are not our friends." And you said, "If it takes large, homogeneous numbers for us to pay attention, assign worth, and acknowledge truth, we are setting ourselves up for an impoverished and inhumane life." I thought that was very spot on to what you're saying.
Although I don't want to bash numbers completely, because I do think they're valuable. I think because you're right about the idea of a norm and a sort of central focus of that as the truth. I think what we're now seeing in so many cases is that we're questioning the idea of a singular truth in general. And I think that's actually good. I don't think there is such a thing, and there never was. So actually there's many different truths, so everybody has different cognitive perspectives. And so it's okay to have multiple interpretations coexisting. In terms of how I think AI, for example, could benefit diversity in cognitive diversity, here are just two examples. One is to counter bias in, let's say, applications for jobs, or let's say for students applying to a program. one of the things that someone has proposed is that could you take the applications and automatically strip out all the indicators that might be used as bias, indicate bias, or gender, for example, or something like that. Now that's actually very difficult to just run that through a filter, and actually you would need something like AI that might be able to learn a system to be able to transform those in such a way that would still let you get the gist of what's important in an application, but leave out any of these factors that might cause a bias. So that's one. It may be a little bit far-fetched, but that's just the kind of thing where AI could be applied to the positive. The other one I think is really already happening right now, which is we have a lot of challenges in international and language barriers between people who want to collaborate. And what's amazing now is that that translation tools, which are AI, are now making that possible, so that I can take a pretty complicated paragraph or so and copy it, drop it into Google Translate, and then send it off to someone who's a friend in China or Spain, and they'll get something. It's probably not perfect, I'm fully aware, but we're using that increasingly, and it's a way of trying to get over these language barriers so that we can start to engage with people from different cultures.
Can I respond to one of the things, which is that example of removing bias in job descriptions? I think we need to rethink job descriptions. Job descriptions are built upon the assumption that we need replaceable workers. And they're built on the assumption that and I mean our entire HR system and our job description system and the way that we compete for jobs makes the assumption that people fit X
kind of
formula category, and that forever and always we're going to find someone that best fits that category. I think rather than addressing the bias within hiring, I think we need to relook at job descriptions and how we in fact hire, and rather than fitting people to the job, fit the job to people, and look at how we can orchestrate a diversity of individuals within a particular job. The job description means that we create this formula, and anything formulaic to some extent we can automate. We're feeding into this vicious cycle of we're setting ourselves up for an additional disruption or additional failure of the economic system by the way we continue to do these things.
Let's assume, and I do mostly agree with both of you, the question then becomes, how does that become real? And I think that's more complicated, and I want to, again, intentionally approach it from a different angle. If I were trying to try and change job descriptions or try and figure out how to get AI to fit things, I'd want to sort of identify in broad communities, Northern Germany, the Northern European countries, Japan, where there are significant job worker shortages, where in fact there's a real effort and a need to try and find new employees in new roles. In those kinds of cases, one may find employers much more willing to try and explore the question of who can do the job that might not ordinarily fit into those categories. And then, in fact, it can become people with AI skills that, in fact, are able to say, well, given that task, there are two possibilities. One is we may be able to reorganize the job, which is, in fact, a set of tasks. So we may be able to change the mix of tasks in a particular job so that a particular task may be addressable by AI. That means that the community that could be involved in it is broader, or that particular set of tasks may be ones that can be in which individuals, and not just folks with disabilities, but people with less experience, which is why I intentionally chose the Komatsu example, in fact can have their abilities augmented over time. So those are two ways. My idea here is, can we identify the sources of demand where people are going to be flexible in what they want, and then try and use these tools to try and meet their needs in ways that, in fact, I'm perfectly happy to agree with you philosophically. If I go out and have the argument in the workplace, I don't want to have the philosophic argument. I want them to do what I want.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want them to.
And in fact, yeah. And in fact, there are examples where and they do come about by virtue of there being some sort of failure of the system. I would agree with you there. I want to add one other proviso there. I think an additional approach would be to look at how we use AI or smarts or the analytics to create better collaboration and better teams. So this notion of a granular job rather than, so right now we're thinking of here's the job description, who's the perfect person for that job description. We're not looking at how do we construct a team of diverse individuals that can work together to do something that is greater than where the whole is greater than the parts. And I think that's an area where it would be good to, because it's a complex task and where we can augment and do the type of augmentative intelligence that you're talking about.
I want to pick up on this, the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and also a question that came from the audience here. Teams and their work structure, okay, I always say this. It's a structure that amplify intelligence or cognitive diversity is an AI team driven by AI solely, not AI machine teaming, I think is what they're saying. But will these AI teams in our future sort of plague human teams? Or will it be more human-machine teaming and the diversity of the teams working together and having those AI agents serve as a check on assumptions?
Right, so the check on assumptions idea is really interesting. So again, think of AI as like just a much more sophisticated type of a spreadsheet, right? It's going to provide us with the tools that are going to be able to assist us at doing things. But to say that that spreadsheet is then going to take over the job of an accountant is really far-fetched, right? Accountants still make a lot of subjective, complex decisions, and they also spend a lot of time communicating with the client and understanding what's going on. So that's what people are good at, and what people with all kinds of abilities are good at. And that's actually, I think, something that we don't have anything to fear. I can tell you from my experience with AI, we're not close to being able to do those kind of things with AI. So don't worry that teams of AI are going to take over. I mean, that's a very science fiction. That's exactly what I want to push back on. Yes, you can see that in movies, true, but it's not reality. And what we'll actually see is that AI will be part of enhancing teams, and individual will have some sort of enhanced tools, and also that the system the group of people working together can start using AI selectively to do things that they may not want to do. For example, just scheduling meetings, right? How many of us like doing that? It's a huge burden, and I really think I'm hoping for the day when something pops out and it says this will manage your schedule for you, and it's a hard problem. But I think that's actually one we can solve, and that would be great because then we'd have more time to hang out and do things like this, like have conversations.
Exactly. Yes.
So the AI tool is going to tell you who you really don't want to see.
Right.
It'll subtly.
It'll learn. It'll learn.
Avoidance mechanisms. But we're talking about building these new AI-enabled systems. There's a question about, well, who decides and determines the ethics of those AI systems? Is it Western elite? And how do we mitigate that problem?
You're always going to have conflict over values. I mean, and therefore any pretension that these things will, in fact, make that go away is silly. And I think the thing we have to be careful of is not to ask it to solve the problem, but to make it clear. So to some extent, I don't want AI tools to eliminate bias in hiring. I would say, let's take the hiring decisions that the three of us would make, and then we can have a fourth that the AI tool picks, and then we can discuss why those are different. And actually make some choices and, in a sense, force out with clarity what the different value systems actually are. But it is true, you may not want Western elites to make the decisions, but given the Chinese programs for personal surveillance and personal scoring, I'm quite sure I don't want those systems to be the ones that make decisions either. So I just want them forced out for us as individuals and communities to be able to discuss.
I think we underestimate how much AI we already use within If go to any employer that has 1,000 applications for a single job, and you'll see that they're using AI already to competitively decide who is going to get the job. If you have never, they're using data and data analytics. So they're using predictive analytics to say that this type of profile of an individual is the type of individual that will work well within this position that you have here. It is an ethical issue, but it is also a weakness in our economy and in that practice and for that company, because what's happening is we're using past data to predict what is going to be performance in the future.
I think it's actually a great point, because it's also happening with admissions to programs too. And that's where, especially, I will tell you one thing that's changing very much is there's a new attention being paid to diversity in certain areas, and I will tell you it's happening here on campus. So we have very strong diversity programs in hiring and admissions now, and we look at very carefully. We ask for a diversity statement from every applicant, and we look at those, and it doesn't. So it's about a person's background in terms of their awareness of diversity and their past record of efforts to think about and address diversity. You can still be like a white male, but still be engaged with diversity. And so, but this is very new. This has really only been the last 2 years. And I can tell you, my experience is it's having a dramatic reshaping of the way we're making those decisions.
Well, that's good to hear that there's this alternative, because I think the other strategy, which is to create protected groups, causes certain people to fall through the cracks and get stranded at the edges, because people don't fit into specific categories. Right. So the numbers game with respect to, are we hiring enough of XYZ checklist of categories, really is not a great way to diversify.
Great.
Exactly, and as you mentioned, being able to review past applicants or employees can tend to perpetuate hiring the same employees. And both Ken and I don't know if you guys have also read the book by Scott Page, The Difference. I think we both really find the idea there on point, that more diverse teams are actually better equipped to solve complex problems than a group with a cumulatively high IQ. And so diversity really matters at solving some of these really challenging problems.
It's a point Ken makes if you give him a little more time.
Yeah, and he makes it very well. There's 2 questions. They're the same question, so I feel very compelled to ask, and it's to Huta. So it is, what is the lawnmower of justice?
Okay. That starburst that you saw is basically the exploding star is a 3-dimensional or a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional Gaussian curve. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what a Gaussian curve is? Okay, good. So you all know the bell curve. Oh, there is, okay. The Gaussian curve is basically the bell curve, but if you think of it as a 3-dimensional scatter plot, one of the challenges that we have with respect to outliers, minorities, detecting weak signals, not being caught up like Uber did with the Edge case that actually caused the car to kill someone, is that the majority overpowers the minority. The way that we, also the data practices that we use mean that we try to emphasize the dominant patterns so you can get to inference very quickly, meaning that if you're training your machine learning system, you want to emphasize things that the largest customer base or the largest group of people would want, because it allows you to very efficiently and quickly get to decisions that people will say, aha, that makes sense, that's right, and that's helping me. But in the process, what we do is we eliminate the outliers and we ignore the margins. Even if we don't do that, the majority will overpower. And so the example that I gave with the voice recognition system, the reason why the older systems recognize the speech and the newer, smarter more sophisticated systems didn't is because they had more data to work with. And so the lawnmower of justice is an attempt to do something that we've talked about quite a bit in accessibility, is to level the playing field. Basically what I'm doing is I'm manipulating the Gaussian curve so that I allow no more than 4, 8, 6, or 8 repeats of a particular data point. And what that allows me the system to do is to learn not just from the majority, or not just to prioritize the majority and favor that, but to learn from the entire set of data points, so including the outliers, the minorities, those unexpected edge cases. And what that does is for security, what we find when you ignore the outliers is that you have a lot of false positives. If you're at all anomalous, like I have a friend whose declared sex on their passport is different from their transitioning, so they're always the ones that are going to get flagged when they go through security, because there's an anomaly, the data doesn't hold. I mean, I can give many different examples where the risks of ignoring the outliers are.
I don't know how you're, I think we only have like a few seconds left, so I wanted to have some additional time for any last comments from
definitely.
John and Ken. Should we wrap up?
No, I think we're good.
No, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll summarize really quick. I think that the panel was a great discussion on the power of diversity and human-machine teaming. I feel relieved that robots might not replace all workers, but that they might actually reinvigorate the workforce. Now we'll have a short break. Please come back to the room around 2:30 so that we can be in our seats before the panel starts at 2:35. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Oh.